Okay. Joyce Lane is my bookkeeper, and she's in her 70s and has got COVID. She's in high care. Very, very good person. So we're doing this year for the refuah of Gita Bas Chana. And Joyce, I hope you make a speedy recovery, a full
Amen.
recovery.
Amen.
Hey, Kevin, you
Amen. Amen.
start teaching us.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yeah.
This is going to be like not even 2 minutes. Okay, so the thing is, okay, it's not really halachic, but it's a practical advice for all of us. So, in terms of when you daven Shemona Israel, when you say the Shema, when you say Ashrei, you have to have kavona. So Ashrei, you have to think when you say Potech et yadecha mazmir lechocha ratzon, means Hashem provides for everybody. That's why Sfarim go like this. So Hashem opens His hands. Then the Shema, the first paragraph, we have to have kavona for. Then Shemona Israel, you have to have kavona from the start until Hakela Kadosh for the minimum kavona. So it's very difficult for most of us. So I heard last week a share from Gedalia Fenster, who's a top Breslev guy in America. He's brilliant. I listen to him regularly, his podcasts.
He's great.
And I don't know if you heard about this, Damon, and I think it's part of Rav Nachman's teachings. If you breathe in, your mind, it clears your mind. So I'm doing that. I'm actually practicing this. You inhale, your mind, it'll clear your mind. You won't think of anything and it could even last like a minute or 2 minutes. So just inhale and just hold the breath there and start saying the Shemona Israel and start saying the Shema and Ashrei. You can come back to it. If you forget, you can go back and you can say Potech et yadecha. Okay, so how's that for? That's what I wanted to say to you guys.
No, that's a nice tip. I'll give it a try. I'll let you know. Thank you.
You breathe in, and then it'll kill your mind because we all need the points. So good for the kavana. Okay, that's what I wanted to say.
No, it sounds
Okay, I did that. I forgot to share.
Yeah.
All right, you guys gotta get on that line. I know you.
I did that as well. I have no idea what's going on.
You don't have any. Okay.
I've got this guy doesn't stop talking in front of me. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, so
when you get to 120 and we're still doing it.
Exactly. So last time we covered Rav Yosef Bava Kamma. I'm not going to go through it. Let's deal with another issue. Okay. In the case of one who seizes the boat of his fellow and does work with it, Rav said if the owner desires, he can take rent. And if he desires, he can take its depreciation. So what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is basically if there was some sort of broken element to the boat because of the fact that it had wear and tear, or even if it deteriorated in terms of a bit of paint work or damage through going through the water, whatever the case may be, we have to make an assessment. Okay, because if the damage is greater than the rental fee for such a boat, the owner can charge the one who seized the boat for the damage, as if he was a thief, right? In a way. So, or if the rental fee is higher because there's not a lot of damage, he can charge the more reasonable rental fee. That's according to Rashi. How do we know? There's this concept of an honest, which is an unavoidable mishap. And a robber is liable for an unavoidable mishap. But he's obviously not liable to pay a rental fee for having used the stolen article. Why? We said, look, if somebody robs, their only obligation is to return what they stole. Their obligation is if they stole an animal and they worked the animal in their field for a few weeks, then if it comes to court, they don't have to pay the rental of the animal's labor, providing that the animal didn't depreciate to the extent that it actually no longer resembles the same animal, because then the physical change affects acquisition for the robber, and he keeps the depreciated animal and replaces it with a cash value at the time of the robbery. But we're saying if it didn't wear the animal out, but there's wear and tear, not wear and tear, there's working of that farm animal, he just has to return it to where he robbed it. Now, that's a little bit different to a shomer, because a renter, which is a suchar, there's 4 different types of guardians. You know, there's a renter, a borrower, there's a paid custodian, there's an unpaid custodian, But as far as a renter is concerned, he's charged for a rental fee, but is not liable for unavoidable mishaps, nor for damage incurred in the normal use of work. So what we're saying is, if you rented a car from Avis and you never did anything wrong and it blew a head gasket, and they can prove that you never, it was an automatic, so you couldn't have toyed with the rev count or anything else like that. That's what you pay the insurance for. That's Avis's rental car problem. So that's during the course of work. Unavoidable mishaps, you're not liable for. It could happen that you hijacked or a variety of things. And again, that's not an issue. So if that's the case, then Rav rules that the boat's owner has the option of treating the seizure of his boat as either rental or as an act of robbery, depending what's the greater amount. If the damage is greater than the rental fee, the owner charges the one who seized it for damage as if he would charge a robber, not that the guy is a robber, because he did rob it in the sense in that he never returned it in the condition at which he took it. If, however, the rental fee is the greater than the damage, then the owner charges him the rental fee as he would as a renter. So the only thing of it is according to the Terumas Hakri, the owner can't, however, treat the one who seized it as both a robber and a renter and charge him both the rental fee and compensation for the damage. Because within that, it's a category where the renter provides some sort of benefit to the person that he's leasing from, and therefore his responsibilities are less. So how did we explain this before? I said the more you're getting somebody to look after your stuff as a favor, the more they are basically, if they're looking after your stuff and they're doing you a favor, they're not going to take on that challenge if you're going to hold them culpable for each and everything. So, for example, I say to you, please look after my dog, here's the food and drink, but I'm not paying you. If Fluffy ends up dead and it wasn't through misuse, it's not your problem. Why? Because why would I take on looking after your animal if I'm going to land up in court? I'd say, listen, you're not paying me. There's only a losing streak here. I could land up in court. You keep the animal and you feed it. If I'm being paid to feed your animal, then I have to have a higher level of stringency because I'm earning as a result of the inconvenience, and therefore there's a stepped up responsibility I have. Okay? If in the actual case it's a rental, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, reciprocity, and therefore it has to be ascertained what's greater, the rental fee or the damage. But you can't have it both ways. And the reason why there's a whole argument as far as is concerned is they're doing each other a favor. How they're doing each other a favor is because the renter is paying for a service, okay, and the person that's leasing the boat is getting the enjoyment of a boat without the overhead. It's like renting a quad bike. So for 1,000 rand, he's getting a boat with 400,000 rand as a sailboat, 38-footer, whatever the case may be, and he's paying 1,000 rand rent for the hour to rent the boat, and he's benefiting. The renter is benefiting because although his boat is worth 400,000, if he's renting it 24/7 and the boat's already had 15 years on the clock, he's made 3-4 million rand out of a boat that's only a couple of 100,000 rand old, providing you're renting to somebody normal that's not going to damage it. So where it's mutually beneficial, the renter can treat it as a case of a robber, not that he can accuse him of theft, but where he sues him for damage or he gets paid rent, whichever is the greater amount. Right. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. So the Gemara explains, according to Rav Papa, who said Rav and Shmuel do not disagree. So what's this whole disagreement? Is that Rav said if the owner desires, he can take rent. If he desires, he can take its depreciation. So all we've learned so far is Rav's opinion, that whichever is the greater he can take, but he can't take both. Now, as far as Shmuel is concerned, he said he only takes its depreciation, meaning that Shmuel maintains that the seizure is treated solely as an act of robbery, and the owner does not have the option of charging a rental fee to the one who seized the boat. So Rav Papa is going to add some clarity, and he said, in essence, even though they seem like they're disagreeing, Rav and Shmuel do not disagree, because this ruling of Rav that the owner may choose to charge either rental or for depreciation refers to where the boat is designated for renting. Okay? In other words, where the one seizing the boat presumably intended to pay rent. That was the arrangement. So when the rental fee is greater than the damage, the owner has the option of treating him not as a robber, but as a renter. Now, as far as that's concerned, he can be treated as a robber because if the damage is greater, just simply because, according to Rav, he's saying, listen, I agreed to rent you my car. I didn't expect you to drive like a hooligan and damage it and go over potholes at 200 k's an hour. You know, in other words, that acts like a robbery. That wasn't the permission and the agreement. So it's if you took it without my permission and did things with it without my permission. Whereas the ruling of Shmuel that the owner may only charge for depreciation refers to where the boat is not designated for renting. In other words, it's presumed that the one seizing the boat intended to steal it and used it gratis, free of charge. So the owner can treat him only as a robber and can't charge him a rental fee, but is entitled to get the damage back, that's for sure. So Rav Papa is saying that they don't disagree. They're talking about two different situations. Or if you prefer to say, both this ruling of Rav and this ruling of Shmuel refer to where the boat is designated for renting. This ruling of Rav that the owner may choose to charge either rental for depreciation refers to where, well, the one who's seizing the boat went down into the boat. In other words, he took possession of it, intent of paying rent. Okay? So what do we mean? Is that the owner had the option of charging him a rental fee as a renter. If, however, the damage is greater than the rental fee, he may treat him as a robber and charge him for the damage. Because although he intended to pay rent, once he seized the boat against the owner's will, the seizure constitutes an act of robbery. So it's almost like you agree on the phone to rent a car to somebody, and there's an Avis driver there, and this guy that's been drinking and partying since 4 a.m. goes to Avis, takes the keys, and by the time he's in the car and starts to drive, you smell that it looks like he might have had 200 shots of tequila and smells like a pickled brewery. And there's something really, really amiss with the oak, and he had bags under his eyes, and you can see this oak might be on drugs. At that point, you realize there's something that's going to go severely wrong. So that's in essence what they're saying. So, whereas the ruling of Shmuel that the owner may charge only for the damage or the depreciation refers to where the one seizing the boat went down into the boat with the intent of stealing it. In other words, it's a different case entirely. So even where the rental fee is greater, for example, according to Shmuel, than the damage, the owner can't charge him rent because the one who seized the boat did so as a robber, and we learnt about that a robber is liable to pay only for the stolen article's worth at the time of the robbery, but not for his use of the stolen article. So in other words, this is a guy that rents his boat for a living, but just because he's left the keys on a hook and the guy in the booth and is prepared to rent the boat doesn't mean that the person taking the keys and getting in and driving off of the speedboat had any intention of paying a rental fee. So according to the Ravad, Shutama Kubet says, he asks why it suffices that the robber just has to return the boat and pay for the damage. In other words, if the damage is such that the boat is deemed to have undergone a physical change, say it looks nothing like the boat he got and took in good condition, then in that particular case, according to the Ravad, it should be then acquired by the robber in its smashed up or damaged state, and he must pay the entire value of the stolen article of the boat in cash. and not simply return the damaged boat and pay for the damage, because that's what we know, that's what's known in the car industry as a write-off. So what is a write-off? Is when they realize that by the time you left your vehicle at the shopping center and you were hit by a Pentechnicon truck, it's going to cost you 3 times the amount of resuscitating a flattened car as to what the insured value of the car is worth. Therefore, the insurance is only going to pay you what the car is worth, not to resuscitate that car and put it back. See what I'm saying, guys? That's what the river's saying. So in that case, you must pay the entire value of that boat in a pristine condition and keep whatever rubble and pieces are left of the boat that he damaged. So, so the question then goes, why does according to the Ravad, why does the boat have, the robber have to pay for any damage at all? Why can't he say to the owner, if it's in a reasonable state, what is yours is before you? In other words, it hasn't physically changed that much. Looks the same, maybe there's a promoter wear and tear. So the Ravad answers his own questions and he says, look, although the Gemara states here that he went down with the intent of stealing, it doesn't mean that he meant to steal the boat permanently. He just went to take it for a joyride. But if he only intended to use it without paying and then return it, then he's not really a full-fledged robber. He's mainly just robbing him of his rental, but he's not going to permanently, seriously keep the boat. So one who borrows an article without permission is, in that case, if you look at Bava Kamma 43b, is deemed a robber because he doesn't have permission to get out of rent. So if that occurs, he's only liable with regard to the loss that occurs in the normal course of work for unavoidable mishaps. But he remains legally, guys, not a renter, a borrower, because he never paid for the rental, and therefore he loses that protection of it being damaged within the normal use with unavoidable mishap. And the minute he's a borrower, inverted commas, because he's not prepared to pay the rent, if the borrowed article is damaged, guys, what's the law? Guys, what's the law?
Liable.
Yes, of course you're liable. Guys says to you, listen, I don't have a car for the meeting. Can I borrow a car? And he ends up damaging your car. Of course he does. You don't have that protection of insurance compared to Avis if something happens in the normal. So when you think you're going to gain by stealing the rental, by just kidnapping it for the day, you lose the protection of a renter. And then you treat it as a borrower. And that's why you have to pay for the damaged article itself, even if it doesn't go through total physical change to render that possession, that of the robbers, only pays the full amount. Okay? So, I tell you what, Kevin, you have to leave in 15 minutes.
No,
10 minutes.
Yeah, 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can quickly go through a couple of things. So the Gemara cites the clause of the Mishnah that reads, if one stole a coin and he cracked it, pays the value at the time of the robbery. If one stole a coin and it became disqualified, the robber says to the owner, behold, what is yours is before you. Now, Arthur did prep because he impressed us all. Last time he said exactly what Rav Huna said, who said when the Mishnah states that the robber acquires a coin that it became cracked, it means that the coin actually physically changed or cracked. It's some discernible physical damage. And therefore...
It's not legal tender.
No, they are. But the issue here is both aren't legal tender. In other words, if a coin loses value, it definitely has suffered a depreciation. If the coin, say there's a coup d'etat in the country and that coin is no longer seen as currency, it loses value. But there's a difference, as Arthur said, between discernible change and non-discernible. So when you see damage to actual currency, like the note is bent in half and torn off, that constitutes a physical change where the owner keeps the note and has to replace that item that he damaged with a value. But if when he stole the currency, there was a coup d'etat in the country, returns of currency a year later, if there's a court date, said, what is yours is before you. Because at the end of the day, he never caused the problem. There were external circumstances. So if it's non-discernible damage, like for example, you've got something that's pure, tara, and it becomes tuma, like teruma, okay, where the kohen can't consume it, or something becomes from kosher to treif. The wine hasn't lost its quality; it never turned to vinegar. Just was touched by a goy, and it perhaps it wasn't a vashal wine, and then it's not eligible for you to use. So it is conceptual value loss, but not actual damage. In that case, if it's conceptual loss, the robber is not responsible for it. All he has to do is return it, because the acquisition for the robber only occurs if there's a physical change, in which case the robber gets the physical changed article and has to give the cash equivalent at the time of the robbery. You get what I'm saying? So that's what it says. So Rav Huna said when the Mishnah states that the robber acquires a coin that became cracked, it means that the currency was actually physically damaged. And when it states that the robber does not acquire a coin that became disqualified, it means that the monarchy disqualified it. So conceptually, what happened is the king minted new coins and declared the old coins no longer valid, for example, as currency, or there's a coup d'etat. So neither in this province nor in any other province is that coin recognized as valid currency, because it's undergone a conceptual change, because it was disqualified by the monarchy. So therefore, the robber is not responsible for anything other than returning that currency. He doesn't keep the damaged currency because it's not physically damaged, it's conceptually damaged, and he doesn't have to pay the cash equivalent at the time of the robbery. But Rav Yehuda says, if the monarchy disqualified it, is considered also cracked, as if it was physically damaged. But if it's provincially disqualified, the coin, but it passes as currency in another province, in that particular case, in other words, the coin wasn't disqualified by royal decree, but the people of that particular province ceased accepting it as currency. It's not like the royal decree carries greater weight than a provincial enactment. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that the significance of disqualification by royal decree is that the coin can't be accepted anywhere, and in any way. In other words, the currency ceases to be a legal tender. And because it's not accepted anywhere, both provincially, nationally, or internationally, in that particular case, that is, according to Rav Yehuda, that's considered as if it's physically damaged, and therefore the robber gets to keep it and has to replace it with the cash equivalent. If it's considered to be damaged provincially, which it just causes inconvenience to the original owner, it only has to be returned to him, but the inconvenience is for him and not the robber. But you must know that that is a problem, because the Mishnah before, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, is saying that if it's a conceptual change, then the thief can return it as is and say, what is yours is before you. So Rav Yehuda seems to be disagreeing with the Mishnah. So Rav Chisda said to Rav Huna, according to you, it says that when the Mishnah states that a disqualified coin doesn't constitute a change in effect acquisition, it refers to where the monarchy disqualified it. Why have the case in which one is stole fruits and they're rotted, or a case of wine and it's soured, which are analogous to the case of where a coin was disqualified by the monarchy, but the Mishnah states regarding the cases of spoiled fruit and soured wine, he pays as at the time of the robbery, and the same should apply to a coin that the monarchy disqualified, which would place the case in the same category as actual cracking. So that's the opinion of Rav Chisda to Rav Huna, who agrees with Yehuda. So Rav Huna answered to Rav Chisda, the cases aren't even comparable, because in the case of spoiled fruit and soured wine, the tastes changed, the smell changed. and it's physical. But here, in the case of a disqualified cane, sorry, guys, in the case of a disqualified currency, it didn't undergo such a change. In other words, there's no physical change, and that according to Rav Huna, he holds that the defining characteristic of the case of rotted foods is that they physically change. But a qualified a coin that is no longer qualified as currency and is being disqualified either by a coup d'etat or the monarchy is a conceptual change. And therefore that conceptual change doesn't have to be made good by the robber. Whereas according to Rav Yehuda and Rav Chisda, it does. Okay, whereas Rav Huna agrees with the Mishnah that says conceptual changes are a different issue. All right, guys, we're done. Do you get the concept?
Yeah, thanks, Damon.
Thanks a lot.
And what's this, Damon? I thought it was the place called Media. There was something, I think, further on.
Yes. So there's certain issues.
Has that got to do with the coins as well?
It's more complicated than that. It's like when you leave South Africa with SARS, you can only leave with 25,000 rands worth of undeclared currency. Internationally, it's under $10,000. You find when it hits $10,000, they want to ask you by FICA compliance where the money came from. So there are certain cases at which currency is barred because of limitations of taking it from one area to another. That's the issue we're going to deal with. So
okay, cool.